Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the DV Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Saintsing, as always. But today's episode, we're bringing to you a panel discussion involving 3 women veterans that's moderated by my colleague, Elizabeth D. Pompey. And recently, DV released a Women Veterans Report. This is actually the 3rd Women Veterans Report that DV has published in the past 10 years, and as its name suggests, really dives into and focuses on the mental health needs of women veterans, including suicide prevention. And this report really couldn't come at a more dire time. According to the VA, between 20 and 2021, the suicide rate among women veterans increased nearly 25%. This report covers suicide prevention and beyond and gives dozens of policy prescriptions of what the United States government should do and what the VA should be doing more for our sisters in arms. You can read the report at womenveterans.org to get a little more acquainted with it. But first, let me tell you a little bit about the women you'll be hearing from. Julia Taylor has served in the Connecticut Army National Guard, and she is a former commander of the DEV Department of Connecticut. Next, we have Kim Hubers, who is a South Dakota Army National Guard veteran, and was actually the DEV's 2023 Disabled American Veteran of the Year. And lastly, Air Force veteran Naomi Mathis is on the panel, and she is actually an Assistant National Legislative Director at the Washington headquarters of DAV. Both her and Elizabeth, they worked tirelessly to not only make sure this report got published, and bringing this discussion right to the doorsteps of Capitol Hill. So I'm going to do what I do best, and I'm going to get out of the way and let you listen to Elizabeth, Juliet, Kim, and Naomi.
Thank you all so much for being here and doing this today.
Thank you for having us.
I want to jump in and talk a little bit about your military experience and your own personal journeys. Let's start with why did you enlist and what was most rewarding about your service? We'll start with you, Naomi.
So the reason I enlisted was I needed stability. I was a single parent with 2 little girls, and I was in a terrible marriage, so essentially a single parent. And I needed stability, I needed benefits, and so I joined the military. I figured that, seemed to be the best way to go. And that was my why, was for my children.
Mm-hmm. And what did you love most about your service?
Everything. The camaraderie, I would probably put at the top of the list. The camaraderie with my brothers and sisters, and they truly are my brothers and sisters to this very day.
Yeah. I hear that from a lot of veterans in terms of, why they stayed, which is often a different reason from maybe why they enlisted. Kim, what about you? Why did you enlist and what kept you in?
I remember being a little girl and driving on vacation and looking out the window and seeing a convoy of trucks drive by. And that stuck with me. I mean, I don't know why. I got to be 16 and any chance to escape my home was a great chance for me. And recruiters came and said, hey, come be with us at Camp Dodge in Iowa for the weekend. We'll have a great time. They gave us pizza. We played video games. We were rappelling. It was wonderful. Nothing like the actual military, but it was fun. And so I knew at 16 for sure this is what I wanted to do. My mom ended up getting sick and I took care of her for a few years. But when she was well enough, I joined, and I remember going to see the recruiter and going down, and he showed us a couple different trucks, and I saw the truck that I wanted. I said, that one, I want to drive that one. And so that's what started for me. I wanted to do something more than myself. And for some reason, I was always drawn to it. Yeah, I don't know. I would have never guessed I'd end up being a truck driver. And that little girl that saw that convoy go by, she knew, I guess.
Juliet, how about you?
So mainly like Naomi, for my children. And so I never had an idea about the military. I was born and raised in Jamaica, and my thing was I'm going to go to school. And I knew that the job I wanted, I wasn't quite sure what title I want, but I knew that I need education, I need training, I need stable housing, I need security, I need all of that. And I was in school, I was in college, and I believe my check bounced, and over the loudspeaker, the bursar's office called me down. The professor nudged me and said, you got to go downstairs. I went downstairs, and she said, did you bring your stuff with you? Because your check bounced. And you can no longer continue the course. And there was Sergeant Rennie, a drill sergeant, a recruiter downstairs at the time. And he says, I can tell you about an opportunity that, will pay for schools, and help you with housing and all that good stuff. So I did. I joined and didn't quite go that route. It took a while for education to come in, but,
Right.
But yeah, that was my thing. I knew that stability I wanted for my children was going to come through some training and education. And absolutely, that's been provided for.
And what kept you in service?
Oh, definitely, like Naomi, is my friends. Yeah, who became my family. I had in-house childcare because I had my neighbor who kept my kids. A friend of mine, his wife, kept my daughter for a year while I deployed. So it's that family dynamics that I believe I needed to kind of keep me grounded that I found and I still have to this day.
I know all of you loved your service and are very proud of it. Obviously, it doesn't come without challenges. Naomi, I want to start with you. What event or challenge did you experience in the military that you think most impacted your mental health?
So what impacted my mental health the most was we were on a convoy, and it was our second day of our convoy, pushing up from Kuwait on up to Iraq. This was in 2003. And somehow there was an explosion, and one of my brothers was killed, and saw him, his body basically go by us on the convoy as we had to hurry up and bug out of there because we had pulled over to the side of the road for a second. And so just getting back and finding out that you lost one of your brothers, that was devastating. And it was the beginning of the mission. We were supposed to be there for a year. So we still had a whole year left to do the mission. And we were essentially told, we were given our time to grieve because the mission had to then start and we had to focus on that. And then, of course, coming under mortar fire and, all the things. We had one land right in our sight on top of a gas cow or a fuel tank, basically, big fuel tank. And there was fireworks like the 4th of July. So that is what I can kind of pinpoint as far as the most traumatic event.
And I think that's common to, unfortunately, someone experiences something like that, and then you have to continue, right? You have an issue to focus on that.
Yeah, and not only did I have to stop, grieving for my brother, but I had to sever any emotion that I had for my 2 little girls. I had a picture of them. I could not look at that picture. I put it at the bottom of my bag, in my A bag, and I never looked at it again the whole deployment. And I basically, essentially, in my mind, did not have children because I knew that if I kept looking at that picture, thinking about my children, I wouldn't be able to focus. I would be a mess. And so I just went into straight survival, mode and just get the mission done mode.
Thank you for sharing that. And I know you're certainly not alone in that. Kim, can you talk about what was most challenging about your service?
I found my journal that I kept in Iraq a few years ago, and I read through it. I haven't touched it for 20 years. And the day that I stopped writing in my journal was a day that someone in our convoy ran over a little boy and killed him. We were on a mission going over a bridge, and there was 2 children that were riding their bikes, and they decided to try to jump between our trucks. And the first kid made it. The second kid was between our first and second vehicle and didn't make it through. And our vehicles that we drove they're the second biggest trucks that the military has. And so the tires alone, each tire is over 500 pounds. There's 5 axles. It was incredibly significant. And we didn't know what happened at first. Quickly found out. And what happened is we were on top of a bridge in a town. And I ended up going with a Marine to the end of the bridge. And there was an Iraqi policeman there as well. And he showed us his magazine that he had no rounds in his magazine. We were only given 20 rounds in country. That's all we had. That's all we were given the entire time we were there. We didn't have bulletproof vests. We had none of that. So I had 20 rounds. He had none. The Marine I was with had some, but the three of us were on one end of the bridge holding half of the town off. And I knew on the other end of the bridge, the same thing was happening. And while that was going on, somebody got a hold of the mom and brought the mom over. And I remember her, it hits harder when you become a mom. I remember her falling to the sand and the scream that she made and the sound that she made. And she just kept throwing sand over her head and just screaming. After the medics came and took what they could of the boy away, we had to get back in our convoy. And we got back in our trucks, and me and another sergeant took water bottles off of our trucks and cleaned the road. And that day I stopped writing in my journal. And now that I'm a mom and I have 4 kids, I still can't handle my kids riding their bikes. I can't handle it. And I don't know if my kids know the full extent of the story or not, but they just think Mom's a little weird that she doesn't even want them on their bikes. And I was so happy when we moved to the country because they wouldn't ask to ride their bikes in town anymore. And I can't get past it. So that was probably, there was more things, of course, that happened, but that was probably the hardest thing. And since becoming a mom, it sticks with me the most.
Thank you for sharing that with us. And I think, you saying that's the day you stopped writing in your journal, I think it kind of speaks to, what we were talking about is that the mission continues. And you have to, kind of shut that away. Juliet, do you mind sharing what was most challenging for you about your service?
So many things. I think in Iraq, just rounds coming in all the time and having to run to the bunkers, and then, they do roll call in the bunkers. And when someone didn't answer to their name, because they call out your name, that was one thing. Another significant thing was when I was stationed after deployment, I was stationed in Fort Lewis, Washington, and I was on guard duty. And there was another, I was an E4, I was an E5 that was a sergeant in charge that night. And there's a female came in drunk. And, of course, when they come in drunk from party, we take their keys so they can't go back out. And I noticed that he left. Sergeant left, E5, and he didn't come back for a while. It's like 6 o'clock. I got to go. Yeah. And so I went, just kind of stood there, I'm an E4, you just don't. And I said, let me go upstairs and check on this female. And then I heard this sound, like faint crying sound, but I was listening to, maybe she's throwing up, maybe something is going on. We have the master key, but so I went in and opened, and I saw him in the act raping her. And, it was reported. And I think within about a week, I got my dream assignment. I remember they're talking about going in, we haven't seen her within that week. So just, didn't show up at PT. And of course, when you have duty, you have the next day off. So I didn't go to PT the next morning. So I didn't see her, and we were very close. She was very young. She had joined the military. She was from the Amish country, and she had left and joined the military. So I was very close to her. She used to babysit my kids from time to time. And so, within that week, I was given my dream assignment to reassign and got to my dream location. And she called me one day and she said, "You were supposed to be there for me." And I heard 2 rounds. And she killed herself with me on the other end of the phone. It took me a while to get through that, And so even when I got to my dream site, Fort Myer in Virginia, and it was great, my career really flourished there and kind of thrust me into where I am now, the path that I took. But it took me a while to celebrate my victories because I believe it came at the expense of someone else. That was really impactful. And I think it still stays with me today. Try to use it now as a thrusting point, as a slingshot. Yeah. Whenever I feel down and tired that I want to go the next mile, I'm reminded that I couldn't have done that. I couldn't have helped, but now I can help. Yeah. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And we talk a lot about, women who experience military sexual trauma in their service, right? 1 in 3 women report.
Yeah.
We don't really talk about, because There are men and women
Yeah.
who maybe they didn't experience it, but they know someone who did.
Oh,
Maybe
absolutely.
they witnessed it.
Yeah.
And there's trauma that comes with that as well. So thank you again for sharing that. So given, and like Kim alluded to, right, these are just, a few examples.
Yeah.
You faced other challenges, of course, in your service. So considering all those challenges, what was your transition like from military to civilian? And we'll start with you.
So my transition, 2007, I was medically boarded from the military. And the reason was due to chronic severe post-traumatic stress disorder, combat related. I could not think right. I was a mess. I could not feel anything. I was a terrible mom. And then I got pregnant and was dealing with all of the normal pregnancy hormones that someone would have to deal with. But I was also dealing with this PTSD. In fact, I went to the doctor and said, please help me. Something is wrong. I'm hearing sounds that don't exist. I'm seeing tracer fire I know it doesn't exist. I know I'm in the United States, but I still see it nonetheless. I still hear the booms. I can't sleep. I can't really eat. When I sleep, I wake up screaming. And I felt like I was being fired.
Yeah.
But I was with benefits. Like you're being thanks for playing, And so I come out and I'm a single parent. Now I have 3 kids and this little baby, and I started to have these thoughts that I should not have been having. And I knew that this little life depended on me. And that scared me. It scared me so bad. And I really kind of sprinted in my journey to get help. So my transition was very difficult. I went through the TAP class that they give us, the transition assistance program that they give us when you come out of the military. I kind of went through that. But remember, this is 2007. I was in combat in 2003. The war was still very much going on. Now, it wasn't at 2003 levels, but it was still very much going on.
Yeah.
They didn't know what to do with me. So it was just kind of, check the boxes and off you go.
Yeah.
And then now what?
Yeah. And your experience with, PTSD and pregnancy, it's very much part of the report, right?
Absolutely. During pregnancy and up to 1 year after giving birth is a time for increased risk of mental health diagnosis, just in pregnancy alone, and then you compound that with everything else that's going on.
Yeah.
And this little innocent baby who doesn't know the thoughts that his mom had.
Yeah.
By the way, that baby is 17 and about to graduate.
Still a baby or no? Feel like a grown up?
Still my baby.
Yeah, you're a baby. Yeah, exactly. Kim, what about you in terms of where your mental health was in that transition from military to civilian? What was that like for you?
I too was sent through medical discharge, and it was my life. It was my career. It was something I wanted to do forever. I spent 14 years in, but when they determined they were going to kick me out, I was the leader of a convoy across the U.S. We had to stop quick and do our annual medical checks or whatever. And I did that, and I was honest, and they immediately pulled me from the second half of my mission. And so I went from convoy commander, team leader. I was our unit suicide NCO. I prevented 2 active suicides. I was the mental health component of our unit. I would have soldiers coming to me all the time. I had this problem, I had that problem, helping them because they didn't want to go to their leadership. And I think that's the way that I dealt with my mental health. When I was little, I learned to just put it in the closet and shut the door real tight, and I was able to separate for a long time. I went through getting my first master's in counseling even, and I didn't address any of it. I didn't know, I didn't understand. When I shut the door, I shut it so tight, nothing was coming out. And helping everybody else, kind of helped keep that door shut, but at the same time, it was helping me. And so when I was med boarded out, I didn't get much of a send off. The mission keeps going. So you're out the door and that's it. You don't get to just come back and visit. And it's like severing your entire family from you overnight. And it leaves such a big hole in your heart. And it was so, so hard. And on top of that, then you go into fighting with the VA, fighting with your benefits, trying to keep insurance for my kids. I'm trying to keep a career going on the outside. I lost my dream job because of it. I had my dream full-time military job working with the counter drug program. It was amazing. I lost that and all the benefits with that. And it was a huge period of loss. And at that time, I wasn't even understanding fully everything that I had shoved in that closet because it was just putting out the fires in front of me. And one of the hardest things was losing that ability to take care of those soldiers.
Juliet, and you're kind of nodding a lot. It seems like you can really connect with that.
Absolutely. With both these ladies, my mental health state at the time, I remember giving the option. You can do med board, or you can ETS, or you can transfer to the National Guard. And I forgot about this until these ladies start talking. So I remember transitioning to the National Guard because that's kind of where I came from. I started in the Guard, went active duty, and I went back to the Guard. But I don't think I realized that wasn't a full-time job. And so coming home and dealing, first of all, I had to have a full pelvic reconstruction surgery when I got out, when I was leaving. And so I thought that going med board was going to take a long time and it was going to be a process and what's going to happen to my children. And do I still keep my BAH? Do I still stay in base housing? What do I do? So my kids went back to Connecticut. Actually, they were in 3 different states because my family was kind of spread out. So one was in Florida, one was in New York, one was in Connecticut. And so it was tough. And at the time, I didn't want to be around the kids anyway. I just kind of felt like they were just kind of better off doing their thing. And I was so military mode and so unhealthy mentally and emotionally that I kind of just want to be with my friends. I just kind of want to do something other than what I was supposed to do. I didn't want to be an adult. I didn't want to, do the adulted thing. Yeah. So where I was not even the state. And then when I got home, after I had that full pelvic reconstruction surgery and a bladder relocation, I had these tubes hanging out of my sides. And at the time, I had a place to go. I called the realtor in line. I did all that. And then when I got to Connecticut, because I chose the option of going back to the Guard. And so I could do my post-surgery at Yale. So when I closed her, like a couple of days, I spoke to the realtor. She said, I'm sorry, but your rental history is not valid or something like that. I could, because I've been in the military for so long, there's no history of me in the community. So I have no history of renting. So I couldn't rent a place. I had the money. I tried to stay, with a friend. Couldn't get the light turned on in my name because there's no history of me anywhere. Couldn't get gas, couldn't get cable. So I ended up staying on my mom's couch until I was sort of healed up. And then I started hanging out with different people, couch surfing, and just mentally, emotionally, it was crazy. And the kids want to come home. And then I'm just in this place where I want to be, but I don't want to live. I want to care for them, but I don't really want them with me full time. And then do I want to be in a relationship? I met someone, I dated, and then everything was just in a really very dysregulated state.
Yeah.
And I just felt unwanted. You left, you joined the military. I joined the military to serve. And then medically, emotionally, something happened and I could no longer serve. And I felt like there was no place for me. Military couldn't keep me, and civilian world didn't want me. No one knew what to do with me. And I didn't know the VA, I didn't fight with the VA because I didn't go. So it was tough. Emotionally, it was really tough.
And that's valid. I should mention I had 3 children, but my 2 girls, my mom had to take my 2 girls.
Yeah.
Because I had the baby and I was still going through the throes of PTSD. And thankfully, the military took care of me. They retired me out. And so my children had health care because my mom got into a car accident and ended up with the kids upside down, like the car flipped upside down. But I say that to say I felt the same way. I felt the same exact way. I just didn't want a life.
Yeah.
But I had to, but I just didn't want to.
Yeah.
You just disconnect with the world. You just kind of, it's such a weird place to be. You feel like you're on this island alone. Fun
with
fact.
no resources.
With no resources. We just realized that we all were in country in Iraq at the same time.
Wow.
Wow.
At the same time. And talking about, just piggyback on insurance, my mom had to put my children on her health insurance. That's another thing when you get out of the military. You don't have health coverage for yourself or for your children. Someone gets sick, and where were they going to go to school? I didn't live anywhere. We were going to register these little people in school.
I think what stands out so much as you all are talking is, when we talk about like risk factors or these different challenges, we tend to talk about them in silos. Like, okay, you experienced, combat related trauma, and we just focus on that and how to address that. Or you've experienced MST, but your stories are so complex and layered, and it's just challenge after challenge, right?
Right.
It doesn't stop, right? From your military to your transition and civilian life. So given all of those challenges that you were experiencing, and, for various reasons, people aren't able to connect with a resource like VA when they get out, at least not immediately. What were some ways that you were trying to cope, and maybe that, your mental health was showing up in your day-to-day life? Naomi?
So in my day-to-day life, I felt like I needed a purpose. I knew that I had this passion and this energy for the military, and I was very good at it. I was a fast burner, what they call a fast burner, which means you basically promote pretty quickly. And so I was very good at my job. I was training people. I had people under me that outranked me because where we were, it was positional, not by rank. Okay. So I had all of this energy and all of this passion for doing the mission, and I knew I needed a new mission. So that's where DAV came in, actually. A friend of mine said, hey, there's a position available on base for DAV. You interested? And I said, DAV? All right, isn't that the organization with like the old guys with the hats and the pins and all that? And he said, yeah, but I don't know. Look, they have a job available. It's making more money than what you're making now. Check it out. So I said, okay. And I went and I spoke to the supervisor that was interviewing, and he said, hey, I think you'd be a great fit. Go ahead and put your application in, and, let's get this going. 2 weeks went by because I was like, I was so scared to jump into something that was not sort of military related, wasn't federal government. I was terrified. And I had this great boss at the time. So the position I was working in was, it was on base. It was through Department of Defense. But I had this great boss, and she said, Naomi, I've been in your position as a single parent. I'm telling you, you need to do what's best for your family. And I said, well, I'm really happy in this job. Even though I'm only making $9 an hour, I'm really happy in this job. And she said, no, this job is not what's best for you. I'll keep you. You're great. But you need to do what's best for your family. Thank God.
Yeah. Well, and
I put all of that energy and that passion and that drive now into doing what I love.
Yeah.
Into still serving.
And we're very grateful that you found your way to DAV kind of by accident, and you're still here, and look at you now. Yeah. Juliet, what about you? Given all the challenges that you talked about before, how did you try to cope with those things?
Well, in the beginning, a lot of alcohol, hanging out at Port 5, which is a naval association. With all of that going on, I still was doing a lot of volunteering in the community. I was still calling people, checking on people. They were checking on me. Someone need a ride somewhere, whether the car is registered or insured or not. We're driving someone, to a doctor's appointment. And so I was always doing something. I was always either figuring out what's going on in school, talking to other veterans, not in the capacity of helping me, but to help them. And then I met Al Meadows, a DFV member, and he says, we have this trip going out to Walter Reed once a month. Since you've been there, because I was a Walter Reed patient for a while, why don't you come on down and you could talk to people there and give out stuff? And I'm like, oh, I'm driving 5 hours to do all that. And he kept calling me, saying, if this man don't stop calling me. And he said he just kept calling me. I mean, for weeks and weeks and weeks talking about LVAP. And I had no idea, no interest. I didn't care. I'm like, first of all, I didn't see not one Black person or one female in your chapter. I'm not coming. And he kept going at me, kept calling me. And eventually I said, okay, fine. If I come with you, he took me to, I think it was, what is it? I forgot what it is. It was some kind of event. And I went with him and I was hooked. And I think what it did, it gave me a structure and how to give back and then how to seek help. Yeah. Because once I start helping people, I saw how they were getting better, that I wanted to get better. And I still didn't even get involved in VA. Yeah. I literally volunteered with him for maybe about 3 or 4 years before I even joined the chapter or even go to the VA. Yeah, it was took a lot because I was still processing. I still had to find a place to live. Once someone had rent me a place, I had to stay, so there's things I still had to do to help with the whole transitioning process and to get myself, to get back on track and build a momentum for myself. Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll talk in a minute, kind of, your experiences with VA. Kim, how about you? How did you try to cope with some of those challenges?
I mean, like all the other ladies have said, you get out of the military and it's like you're fired. It's like you're thrown away. We're the healthiest. We're the fittest of the fit when we go into the military, and then we get broken, and then we're out and we're gone and our family's gone and everything changes and you come back and nothing fits. Nothing is right. You don't fit anywhere anymore because you're too broken for the military, but now you're too broken for civilian life, which doesn't understand you either. And so I remember about 9 months after deployment, being in the kitchen with a couple other guys, and somebody said, I'm just starting to feel like myself again. And the other guy's like, yeah, me too. And I was like, yeah, me too. 9 months after a deployment, no help, no transition, nothing. We got 3 months off. I think we came back to be with our family and then back to drill again. There was no one to help us process, to understand, to do any of that. And my way of doing it, I shut it in that closet, shut the door real tight, and I distracted. I was working on my master's degree. I was working full-time overnights from 11 to 7. I picked up a part-time job. I was doing internships. I was doing everything I could to distract from what was going on, how I was feeling, and the hard work I needed to do. And I didn't know I was doing that until the last several years, probably. I look back and it's like, oh, I get it. Yeah. I know what I was doing. But at the time, I thought I was just being productive. But it was a trauma response.
Yeah.
And that's, I have all this energy out there. I want to help. I want to help my country. I want to help people. I want to do these things. And yet you're broken and don't realize you need to be fixed.
Yeah.
And it was just,
it probably felt like even healthy at the time because you're like, I'm doing so much.
Look how good I'm doing. I'm so productive. Yeah. I'm okay because I'm productive, right? And something. It couldn't have been more opposite.
Yeah. I remember reading someplace that you only need 2 hours sleep. And I was always on the clock, working, doing something. Whatever part-time job you could think about, I got it.
Yeah.
Nighttime job you could think, I got it. Something, just not to be around those kids. Because my mom, she couldn't say, come get the kids because I'm working.
Yeah.
So.
Kim, I know that once you did start seeking out help and go to the VA healthcare system, it was quite an uphill battle for you, a years-long fight. Can you just give us a snapshot of that experience and then how that made you feel?
Oh, it's hard. It's been like 14 years of it. I dealt with a lot of dismissiveness with the VA. I deal with a lot of health issues that are not mainstream, that are not fully explainable even to this point. I went through so many doctors. I went through one lady and I was in pain, and she was a mental health professional. And she said, well, I can tell you're really anxious. And I said, what do you mean? She's like, you're shaking your leg. And I said, I'm in a significant amount of pain. No, I think you're anxious. I said, no, I'm not anxious. And it got to the point where I was careful what I wore, how I dressed, that I had makeup on, that my hair was done. So they wouldn't instantly say something is wrong. And yes, there were things wrong. But what I've experienced, and a lot of females have experienced, is if you have a mental health issue, they will no longer look at your physical health. And for me, my physical health was what was taking me out.
Yeah.
And that was not the summer, but the summer before I got to a point where my life, I knew, like, I'm at the end physically. I went through a minor stroke, a minor heart attack. I got some pretty hefty diagnoses and still keep gaining them as I go because we don't know what's going on. But I had to get that taken care of because they weren't taking me serious.
Yeah.
And I got sent to mental health over and over again, and I would pass tests. I got sent to a telehealth program. That was 6 weeks. I had to drive in, leave my kids. My husband had to miss work, do that. I got it let out in 6 weeks instead of 8. And he's like, you're doing all the things. And I said, I know what to do. That's not what's wrong. It's the physical stuff. And I went back and I said, okay, I've passed this and I passed this and I passed my neuropsych and I passed all these things. Please help me with my physical issues. And I got told, well, we think you should go back to mental health again. It was about the 4th time. And I said, I just got through a program 2 weeks early. I just did it. And the lady on the phone said, so let me understand you're refusing services. And I said, I'm not refusing services. I just completed them. Well, I will go ahead and dictate on your file you're refusing services. Hung up the phone, and that was used against me for my claim against all of my service-connected injuries. I mean, it's just the tiniest snapshot of a million things that I've been through with this, but it's been hard. And until that physical stuff was addressed, that was tearing me down mentally too. But I had to take care of that because that was something I could take care of.
Right.
And it's a lot.
And I know, when we've spoken before, you've referred to it as like medical trauma, right? All the, things that you went through. And I don't think that's uncommon, unfortunately, whether it's, a veteran feeling dismissed or for some other reason being able to unaccess the care that they need. That's just kind of, trauma on top of trauma. Julia, what challenges did you face in accessing mental health care, if any?
I think access to care. Yeah. I remember Al Meadows told me to go to the VA to go register. Mm-hmm. And I remember not knowing where to go. I walked in and there was a round desk for eligibility, which is right next to the emergency room, but I wasn't sure where to go. So I asked someone, where do I register? And they said, go down the hall. And I'm walking down and I don't see anything. So I just, there were people there just standing around. There was like a coffee area in the front at the time. And I just left. I saw this hallway looking like the hallway of death. Mm. And I didn't go. And I said, did you go? And next week I said, okay, I'll just do it online. I went online. It was so confusing. I need to submit the DD-214. Didn't care to go figure that out. It was just, I think I was just in a place where I didn't have a clear path to access the VA. I didn't know where to go and who to talk to. So eventually when I went to eligibility and they said, do you have an address? I don't have an address. And they said, we have to mail you your ID. If you don't have an address, we can't mail you the ID. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't get an ID card because and I don't know why I didn't tell her, well, I could mail it to my mom's house. She said, no, it has to be your address. I don't have an address. So I just left. Mm-hmm. I just left the VA. And I think it was through DAV again. I think it was probably mailed to the headquarters. I'm not even sure. But I remember the first couple of months, I just didn't have the right address. I didn't have anywhere for them to mail me ID, so I couldn't get an ID card.
Yeah. And certainly there should never be barriers to healthcare, for anyone. Then you think about the veteran population that, for veteran or various reasons is already hesitant to seek out help, probably because it's been drilled in your head mm-hmm. to just push through it. And so, it's too easy to discourage people right from getting care. So it's just so important that we remove all of those barriers. Juliet, I want to ask you too, because you've spoken a little earlier about wanting to end your life at one point. Mm-hmm. What helped you get through that time, or what would have helped you?
What helped me through that time? I think tired of watching my kids being confused really helped me to want to do more. I think my last stay, I spent 3 days in a psych ER, non-VA psych ER. And, you know, no one called me and checked on me because they just figured I was at work somewhere. But I was literally working at the time. I was working at the VA and was just having an issue, just a problem all the time, sick and just not wanted to be around. A friend of mine walked with me and checked me into the psych ER. And I remember laying there was a glass room with just like a platform mattress, the platform thing with a mattress on top on the floor, and really thinking about my children and wondering if they really do need me or not. And then I figured I think I needed them more than I believe they needed me. But I think my children is really what thrust me into wanting to seek care, because my goal for suicide was I didn't want them to clean up after me. And so I was always trying to figure out what's the best way to do it. Driving over a bridge, taking some pills, but then that's messy. And then I didn't want them to be traumatized by it, so I couldn't figure out how to not make them suffer. Mm-hmm. And then as I opened up my mind and my heart to care, it just kind of was like, okay, let me try this and see how it is. Yeah. And it actually was Dr. Satchel. She was at the women's clinic before she passed. So I spoke with her, and she says, okay, I'll help you. And that just kind of built that relationship. But it started with my children.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about what we think VA does well, because I know you've all had good experience as well. Yeah. Naomi, what do you think VA does really well, especially when it comes to mental health care?
I will say when it comes to mental health care, the vet center, I absolutely loved the vet center. My first encounter with vet center was shortly after I got out, and it was fantastic. You go in there, you have a cup of coffee, you sit down with a bunch of older timers, or, I say old timers, but the previous war, right?
Yeah.
And they were just fantastic. They were great people, great folks. And you have a psychiatrist and a social worker, usually. It was just like a more casual setting. And, even active duty can go there to the vet center, not just veterans. But anyway, so I think vet center is something that they do extremely well. And they even have mobile units. Definitely, that's one of the things. And they're listening. Mm-hmm. They're actually listening. We get a chance to speak with the executives over at VA, and they really genuinely want to hear things like this. Mm-hmm. They genuinely want to get that feedback to try to make a difference and fix what's broken.
Yeah.
So, and I'll say to my current facility that we're at, Washington, D.C., my doctor is amazing. Amazing. I can shoot him a secure message, and say, hey, I've got this going on. Do you think you can help? Or what can I do? Or, and I'll get a message back within 24 hours. He will answer me back within 24 hours if he needs to see me, or, let's do a telehealth or whatever I need. I mean, just fantastic. The nurses there are amazing. Yeah. And I have only good experiences, really, myself with VA for VA healthcare. So yeah, I think that's their primary care is great. In fact, most veterans that go to VA and have an encounter with primary care, they're satisfied.
Right.
And VA is a leader in research. They're a leader in innovations and medical breakthroughs that come through.
Yeah.
VA is the largest healthcare system in the world. Mm-hmm. And so for them to utilize that population that they have and the resources that they have to make breakthroughs in science and in research is I think they're doing really well with that.
Yeah, and I think DAV makes clear in the report that we really believe that VA is best positioned to provide the best care. That's why we want to, really dig deep and see what we can do better. I want to switch gears a little bit to Naomi's point that, people are listening and they want to hear from you. Based on your personal experience or anything you've seen in the report, Kim, what would you want to say to policymakers and legislators, specifically when it comes to mental health for women veterans?
Wow. It's a big ask.
Yeah. You don't have to solve all the problems.
Right. Where do I start? No, I definitely think there's a ways to go. I think that for me personally and a lot of other women veterans I served with that have had similar issues, really making sure that people understand, the providers understand that having a mental health condition does not negate physical health issues. That the vet center is great. Let's keep going with that. And what a lot of veterans don't know is that that's confidential because this is a huge part of the veteran world. Your claim for disabilities, all of your records at the VA are accessible. And some people don't want to do that. I have a veteran that I've actually helped with some custody issues. And she was going through potentially losing her children. And she knew those VA records could get brought in by her ex-husband or soon-to-be ex-husband. So she refused to go to care. And I said, please go to the vet center. It's confidential. You're safe there. Please go. So that's something that I think that they need to, because claims and fears like that are such a big issue. That's something that really needs to be put out there. I actually testified in court for her about suicide as well because they were trying, her ex-husband was trying to take her kids away because he took them from her and she tried to commit suicide thinking she'd never see her kids again. Mm-hmm. And so she refused then to get the help she needed because he was going to use those mental health records against her. I mean, there's a lot of things like that. So the vet center and then me personally, a little more help and a little bit more acknowledgement of the War-Related Illness and Injury Study Center, who is the top of research for the VA, who I credit with saving my life. Yeah. So funding for them, helping with their projects, they are making a significant impact in physical and mental health for veterans. I mean, it's incredible. The research, the programs, the studies. I mean, we are so blessed to have them. And there is nobody in my hometown, our whole VA system, that even knows who they are. Mm. So let's get that word out and let's follow some of the research to help some more veterans because what they're doing is working.
Yeah. So. And I think that's a big part of the recommendations in the report is like we have some great resources like that, but we need more of them, especially for women veterans. Yes. Juliet, if you could give one message to policymakers or legislators, what do you want them to know?
I would say put more effort in care in the community program for mental health. VA hours are 8 to 4, 9 to 5 or whatever. If you're working and if you can't meet those hours, then it's kind of difficult to get your mental health care through the VA. The VA has an awesome care in the community program where you can choose your mental health provider in the community. VA will pay for it. You need to go through your primary care to submit that referral for you in the community. You can even find your own mental health care provider and then tell VA who that person is, and VA will help that person, that clinician, to become accredited. And then pay for your care in the community, which is what I do. So I get my care Sunday night. I called my therapist last night. Yesterday I was feeling a little muddled, and last I said I need to talk to you. So it was like we came in last night very late. I spoke to so that program I believe is awesome. Yeah. I know a lot of working moms, single mom, people are getting out the military, people are in the Guard who have a deployment in Guard and Reserves, who are qualified for VA services but just can't get to their provider, at a convenient time between balancing home and work and school. And so the care in the community program is amazing. It's a part of the Mission Act, I believe.
Yeah. It's also important to, I think, make note that if there is a veteran that's in crisis, they can present to any emergency department.
Absolutely.
In the community, and VA will
pay for it. Yeah. It's an amazing program, and I think put more effort into that because a lot of these clinicians aren't being paid on time. So I hear from these clinicians all the time. And another thing, I know you said one, but I'm on this one, is My Healthy Vet. Use the My Healthy Vet program. You can connect with your providers through My Healthy Vet program. Any hours of the night you wake up, you can send a message to your provider,
Your
VA provider, all your list of VA providers, whether it's your care and a community provider, your mental health, your optometry. I go to the vision program for low vision, whatever. So that is awesome. So put more money into that, more effort, more resources, more studies, and bring it out in the community, because veterans still don't know about those programs. I'm meeting veterans all the time who still don't know about those programs. So I think it's a part of my job to thrust it out there to tell them.
Yeah, and thank you for doing that, because we know, again, specifically with women veterans, how important that outreach is, and making sure that they're aware. You also, you talked about community care. I just want to mention in the report, we talk about that because we know that women veterans use community care at high rates. So we have some recommendations in there about training requirements and things like that.
Right. The community care providers should be trained the same exact way that the VA providers are trained.
Yes.
Right now, they're not required to take suicide prevention training.
Yeah.
And that is a huge gap that we recommend VA ensure that all, if you are getting paid by VA, you should get suicide prevention training.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Ladies, I know we've talked about a lot. Thank you so much for everything that you've shared. Any final thoughts or words of advice to your fellow women veterans who might be watching? I'll start with Kim.
You're not alone. You're not alone. I firmly believe that people feeling like they're alone or the world is better off without them is the worst and most dangerous feeling, and not having hope. But you're not alone, and we're so slow to reach out to each other, to reach out for help and assistance. But what you have to remember is that everybody wants to help you. And maybe you don't want to burden your family, but find a military brother or sister, because we find reward, we find benefit in helping you, and give that to us. That's a gift to all of us. So you're not alone. Reach out, and we're here for you.
Juliet?
Enroll and register for VA. If you can't find the eligibility office, ask someone. Don't just go in and walk away. But whatever you do, because VA has resources and has program for us. And every VA has a liaison that can help you in the community. They used to call the liaison OIF liaison. I think it's changed that title. But every VA has someone that you can talk to as soon as you walk in. Eligibility is now highlighted, especially in Connecticut VA. There's a sign there because that's something I worked on. And we also have a VA clinic, a women's clinic separate, but register and enroll in VA services.
Yeah.
That's start there.
Yeah. And what I hear too in your answer is like advocate for yourself.
Absolutely.
Right?
Advocate for yourself.
Yeah.
Yes.
Naomi, any final thoughts?
If you are a woman veteran and some of this relates to you, and you do feel like the world doesn't really need you, no, the world is absolutely better with you in it.
Absolutely.
I have that even on my keychain. My son has it on his keychain, because it's just is better with you in it, and seek help. So I'll say that, 1. 2, I'll say reach out to DAV, if you need help with your benefits, your, you don't know where to go for health care, whatever, you can't find your VA facility, you can go to va.gov. But for sure, reach out to DAV. And I want to thank you, Elizabeth, who championed for us, who may not be a veteran, but really have the drive and the passion to ensure that we have the benefits and services and healthcare that we earned, that we fought for, that we put our lives on the line for, that we put our families on the line for, and that we deserve. And so I want to thank folks like you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, that's it for today, folks. Really appreciate you listening in on this absolutely necessary conversation. If you want to learn more about the report, you can go to womenveterans.org. You can also go to DAV's resource page on women veterans. And lastly, if anyone you know of needs help with their VA claim or accessing their VA earned benefits, please reach out to a DAV service officer at benefitsquestions.org. And I'm Matt Saintsing. Until next time.